All right, so this part of the story is still in the Apologoi. It is still the story within a story. Odysseus is still flashing back and telling King Alcinous the story of his past. So after he goes to the Cyclops, ends up with the King of the Wind, ends up with the other giants. Now we're at Circe, and that is what we are going to focus on for the next few minutes. So let's go to the part from the textbook, which starts on page 109. Okay. Book 10, Circe, the Grace of the Witch. So once again, just like they did with Calypso, the sweet nymph, there's this idea that these women are both dangerous and helpful. They have these dual sides. This is a painting from 1912 to 1913. It's like an actress playing Circe. So if that helps you visualize her, great. If not, I have some more art later. All right. Whoop. So as I told you, Odysseus and his men land next on the island of Aeolus, the Wind King, and they stay with him for a month. To extend his hospitality, Aeolus gives Odysseus 2 parting gifts, a fair west wind that will blow the fleet of ships toward Ithaca, and a great bag holding all the unfavorable stormy winds. With insight of home, while Odysseus is sleeping, the men open the bag thinking it contains gold and silver. The bad winds thus escape and blow the ships back to Aeolus' island. The king refuses to help them again because he now thinks they have been cursed. Then they go to the Laestrygons, those giants I told you about. They escape with just one ship, and here they are now. The lone ship then sails to Aea, home of the goddess Circe, who is considered by many to be a witch. There, Odysseus divides his men into 2 groups. Eurylochus leads one platoon to explore the island, while Odysseus stays behind on the ship with the remaining crew. So half of his men are going to explore Circe's island, and he's staying on the ship with the other half. So it's kind of like a reverse of what happened on Cyclops' island. So maybe he's changing his tactic. Is it better? We'll see. In the wild wood, they found an open glade. So this island is wilderness, a forest, but an open glade is sort of like an open field. Around a smooth stone house, the hall of Circe. And wolves and mountain lions lay there, mild in her soft spell, fed on her drug of evil. So you would expect if there were lions and wolves that they would be aggressive, but they were just laying like pets. None would attack. Oh, it was strange, I tell you. But switching their long tails, they faced our men like hounds, who look up when the master comes with tidbits for them, as he will, from table. So these wolves and lions are looking at the men like a dog, like, give me some food, like big puppy dog eyes, and they're just kind of like, moving their tails, acting very non-threatening. Humbling those wolves and lions with mighty paws fawned on our men, who met their yellow eyes and feared them. So they're acting affectionate. They're acting like dogs and cats, like house pets, when they're really these giant beasts. In the entranceway, they stayed to listen there. Inside her quiet house, they heard the goddess Circe. Low she sang in her beguiling voice, while on her loom she wove ambrosial fabric sheer and bright. By that craft known to the goddesses of heaven, no one would speak until Polites, most faithful and likable of my officers, said, Dear friends, no need for stealth. Here's a young weaver singing a pretty song to set the air a-tingle on these lawns and paven courts. Goddess she is, or lady. Shall we greet her? So once again, just like Calypso, Circe is singing and weeping. Looks completely non-threatening. She's beautiful, and everyone's like, oh, it's just a beautiful lady. Like, what's the problem? Let's go, she'll be nice to us. Let's go bother her. So reassured, they all cried out together, and she came swiftly to the shining doors to call them in. All but Eurylochus, who feared a snare. A snare means like a trap or a bamboozle. The innocents went after her. On thrones she seated them and lounging chairs, while she prepared a meal of cheese and barley and amber honey mixed with Pramnian wine, adding her own vile pinch to make them lose desire or thought of our dear fatherland. So she welcomes them all in. She gives them food and drink. Seems so nice, but she puts a little bit of like a vile pinch of something in there that makes them forget about home, much like the lotus eaters. So it's like these same dangers keep coming up again in different forms. Scarce had they drunk when she flew after them with her long stick and shoved them in a pigsty, bodies, voices, heads, and bristles, all swinish now, though minds were still unchanged. So she gets them drunk, and they're lying there having a good time, and she comes running at them with a stick, puts them in a pigsty, and she has turned them into pigs. Now, this is the really cruel part. They're all pigs, but they still have men's brains, so that seems pretty bad, right? To be a pig but know you're a man, that seems awful. So squealing in they went, and Circe tossed them acorns, mast, and cornelberries, fodder for hogs who rut and slumber on the earth. So she's like, oh, you were just eating cheese and honey? Here's pig food. Pigs. Down to the ship, Eurylochus came running to cry alarm. Foul magic doomed his men. But working with dry lips to speak a word he could not, being so shaken, blinding tears welled in his eyes, foreboding filled his heart. When we were frantic, questioning him, at last we heard the tale. Our friends were gone. All right, so now just one man made it back to the ship where Odysseus is this time. So Odysseus is not a pig. Half of his men are pigs. The other half are on the ship with him, and now they have to figure out what they're doing. So now the textbook, we see these 3 dots, meaning they're cutting stuff out, and they're just going to give us a little summary. So Eurylochus tells Odysseus what has happened and begs him to sail away from Circe's island. Against his advice, however, Odysseus rushes to save his men from the enchantress. Okay, so he's lost so many men at this point that he's like, I'm not going to leave these guys turned into pigs. I'm going to go save them. On the way, he meets the god Hermes, who gives him a magical plant called moly to protect him from Circe's power. I always mean to look this up, and I'll do it this time, but I feel like this moly, holy moly, I feel like that might be where that comes from. We're writing it down to look it up. Holy moly, because it's spelled like that. So Hermes gives him moly to protect him from Circe's power. So it's like if you ever watch like a vampire or some kind of magic show where they have some kind of charm that won't let the supernatural being take them over. That's what this moly is. Still, Hermes warns Odysseus that he must make the goddess swear she will play no witch's tricks. Armed with the moly and Hermes' warning, Odysseus arrives at Circe's palace. So now he arrives, he's going to confront her. He's got this special holy moly. Circe gives Odysseus a magic drink, but it does not affect him. And he threatens to kill her with his sword. Circe turns the pigs back into men and puts them all into a trance. They stay for 1 year until Odysseus finally begs her to let them go home. She replies that they must first visit the land of the dead and hear a prophecy from the ghost Tiresias. So a lot is summarized right there, but essentially Odysseus convinces Circe to turn his men back into men by threatening her with the sword, and then he stays for a year. And it's much like the situation with Calypso. He stays because she is capturing him there, and they're also having a relationship. But as he said previously, in his heart, he never gave consent. She is forcing him into this relationship. So we're going to pause here, answer some questions. Then we'll talk a little bit about the land of the dead. And if you're like, oh my gosh, that sounds so interesting, the land of the dead, you are so free to read about that on your own. Go for it. I would never stop you from reading. And then Odysseus is going to get stuck between a rock and a hard place.